Hey everyone, Kevin here, and welcome back to my channel. So I have been waiting to make this particular video for quite a while now, and the time has finally come. This week marks 4 years since I left the classroom, and I wanted to take a moment to reflect on that and discuss how I've changed and how my life as a whole has changed in that time frame, for both the people who are still thinking about leaving education and for everyone else at large who really don't seem to give the problems teachers face much of a second thought. And the biggest thing for me to wrap my head around now is actually not how much better my life is, I'll get to that in a minute, but rather how I taught 7th and 8th graders my last school year. Those 8th graders will be graduating high school in a month. And I've actually run into and talked with a couple of them recently just to see how they're doing now. Oh, and those 7th graders, they're going to be seniors this fall. The class of 2027 will contain the very last students I taught directly, and that's rapidly approaching. But is that really a big deal, though? No, not really. But the passage of time inevitably makes me remember that my contributions in the classroom are becoming more and more of a distant memory to those students, who, of course, are the ones I ultimately went into the profession to teach. But most importantly, that passage of time makes me realize how much my life has improved since I left. And being the person on the outside looking in these last 4 years, have given me tremendous insights into how the system has failed education as a whole and failed our students and educators. And to highlight that, let me visually show you where I was and where I am now. I officially went on medical leave and tendered my resignation on April 26th of 2022. In the months before that, I had been attending support group and therapy sessions to manage the extreme stress and burnout I had been feeling for years up until that point. Here's a photo I took of one of those Zoom calls only a few weeks before I quit. And as you can see, I was in my classroom during those sessions. Like most educators, I was so busy, had so much work to do, and routinely stayed very late just to keep my head above water with all the unrealistic expectations and lack of support from administrators, along with the constant threats of violence from students. And sure enough, you can see how dead inside I looked just from this picture. And sure enough, a week later, a second fire was set in my classroom, and a fight was recorded and posted on social media between some of my students the same day, all of which I was somehow blamed for, even though administrators refused to enforce the discipline policies we supposedly had. And that's when I finally broke, and when I managed to get out of the last month of the school year. On April 26th, I turned everything in, emptied out my classroom, and took a picture with 4 of my students who stayed behind to say goodbye. Even though I may be smiling a little in that photo, if you look closely enough, you can see how disheveled I really looked and how tired and burned out I was. After that, though, I drove home. And apart from one single time where I watched a marching band competition in the fall that one of my students reached out and asked me to attend, I haven't stepped foot on a school campus since. I didn't actually smile for real again until 2 days later when I hiked a small mountain in my city, which I also took a picture of. It was the first time in years where I felt like myself again. Probably the first time since early in college or even my own high school years, to be honest. I realized sitting on that mountaintop how much of myself I'd lost and how I let myself be defined by the job. My life was consumed by being a teacher to the point that I tied my identity to it and had forgotten who I was on a personal level. Something I learned through therapy wasn't normal. And it was on that mountain that I also let Mr. Wheeler die and Kevin return from the dead. Sure, I felt selfish for leaving my students, and I love being a teacher, but the art of teaching has been lost. And that was such a small part of what the job was toward the end anyway. I didn't quit teaching because I didn't love being a teacher. I chose to leave because of poor management, condescension, absurd directives, data and assessments of both students and teachers being valued over the relationships we formed, and my personal well being and the well being of my students continually being ignored. Selfishness isn't inherently a bad thing, And if the system doesn't let teachers take care of themselves, then how can we ever effectively take care of the students? We were educated into the mindset that giving of ourselves and pouring from an empty vessel to the point where we had nothing left was normal, when it wasn't, and never should have been seen as such. It's caused millions of teachers to burn out and quit in the last 6+ years now, when we realized that things could be different after seeing what life was like when we came back from COVID. And dear Lord, have they been different since. In my post teaching career, I can breathe and have real time off to relax. I'm respected for my work, trusted to do my job, fairly compensated, and I have the time and space to actually live a life. I don't get the Sunday scaries anymore. I don't sit in my car at school getting anxiety about being assaulted before walking into school every day. And I no longer feel like I have to constantly defend myself from false accusations and administrator misconduct. As an example, back in January, my grandmother was seriously injured in a fall, and my boss, who is a freaking amazing human being, made sure that I could go and be there at the hospital rather than worrying about work for the day until she stabilized and my mother could fly in, since I was the nearest family member to go. Oh, yeah, and related to that, I actually have sick and vacation days to use as I please for things like that, or for vacations whenever I want to. I think every teacher knows that we never had any of those things. And heaven forbid something bad happened, because then we'd be screwed and unable to take time off. And no, the myth of summers off does not apply. The difference in that alone is night and day. And on top of that, I feel like I get better healthcare and retirement plans. My pay goes farther, even though I'm not making that much more than I did when I was a teacher, and I'm doing work that I find not only valuable, but enjoyable. Even though my contributions to students will always be valuable too, the job was mostly a thankless one, and I never really got to see if what I did made a difference. But now I've redirected those energies into doing something I do see results from, both on a personal and professional level. Even these videos alone, I never would have attempted doing if not for leaving teaching and being encouraged by others I met on LinkedIn to do so. And they helped me get the job I have now, making trainings for a company who improve the quality of life for millions who've lost limbs or have mobility issues. 4 years later, I feel happier, safer, and like my work is rewarding now, rather than feeling of just treading water like I was in the classroom, where I was stressed, burned out, unappreciated, systematically deprofessionalized, and unable to grow. No, the grass isn't perfectly green outside of teaching, and I definitely have horror stories which temper all of these good things, like being laid off and unable to find work for 8 months once, which stretched me almost to a financial breaking point. But I'll always argue that I'd rather have the stress and worry about being unemployed than whatever it was that I had in the classroom. And yes, with the economy and job market the way they are, it's not a great time to leave teaching, and you'll have a harder time than I did securing roles as quickly. But if literally any of my story has resonated with you, and you've been wondering if you can even make it to June, much less be in the classroom next school year, then I think you know the answer to your own question. It's going to be tough to successfully transition. However, I can tell you without a doubt that not only will I and thousands of others be here to help and guide you on that process, but now, 4 years later, I have no hesitation when I say that I am happier now than I ever was as a teacher, and I know so many others who can say the same. As I said in another video a while back, my worst days now are still better than my best days as a teacher, and I will never take for granted, no matter how many years pass, that reality. Your physical and mental health and well being shouldn't take second place to anything else. And I can guarantee you, as someone who's done that, it was worth it. Well, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my trip down memory lane and gained something from today's episode. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and clicking the like, subscribe buttons, and even the bell one if you haven't been yet notified whenever I post something new, and to maybe bring a few new people into the channel. Every little bit helps, and I will be deeply appreciative. For now, though, I've been Kevin, and I will see you in the next video.